Rock Fight, where we speak our truth, slay sacred cows, and sometimes agree to disagree. This is an outdoor podcast that aims for the head. I'm Colin True, and joining me today, he just filed the paperwork to form the first Rock Fight employee union. It's Justin Hausman!
That's right, you son of a bitch. You're the man, and I'm the oppressed.
Well, I'm the man? Yeah, I am kind of the man.
No, not that way.
No,
not
that's
that way.
what you
know
said.
Exactly what I mean. You know exactly what I mean.
What are the benefits you're trying to
Not
win?
gonna lick your boots. Hey. Respect.
Well, that's a little much now. Come on.
Well,
all right.
I feel like
you expect
I
to be
deserve
compensated for your time?
I feel like I deserve it, frankly.
We're gonna talk. We're gonna have some kind of a union conversation.
Can you have a union of one?
Or are you by default a union of one if you are only one? Like as an independent journalist.
Union obviously is at least two things coming together. That's the definition of the word at this most basic level. But could you have a labor union of just one?
Well, and by the definition of the word, you would think no.
You know what? Let's ask
Bryce Covert,
business reporter Bryce Covert, who will be on later today to talk about REI's union busting efforts.
So before we get to that, though, today we are going to run through some of the more notable or exciting headlines that come out of the outdoor industry and community. But before we get to even that, we got a few housekeeping items. So everyone listening, please follow and rate The Rock Fight wherever you're listening, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or any other podcast app. If you are an Apple Podcasts listener, however, please leave us a written review, something simple. You can say like, hey, I can tell that Justin has a Master of Arts by the way he talks about pickleball. That'd be a great review. Actually, if someone writes out on Apple Podcasts, what do we do for them?
Can I give reviews about reviews? Because that'd be a 5-star review.
That would be a 5-star review. And actually, to entice you even more, from now until the end of June, if you leave a written review and you take a screenshot and send it to myrockfight@gmail.com as proof, we'll send you a Rock Fight or a Gear and Beer sticker. So I'm bribing you with stickers for written reviews, please.
They're cool stickers.
They're cool stickers. And hey,
can they see these stickers on the website that I'm about to talk about?
Not yet.
That seems like
once we get through our unionization
it?
efforts, maybe we'll get that. We'll have our web developers do that for us. But how can though? Speaking of the website, Justin, how can our listeners follow along or reach out to us?
Well, they can email us, which is that's short for electronic mail at myrockfight@gmail.com. We are on the socials. Our Instagram handle is rockfight.co. And why don't you head over to rockfight.co and then click on join on the mailing on our newsletter. We'll mail you some fun stuff once a week. That comes out on what, Sundays? Sundays.
Yeah, sign up for that newsletter though. Click join the mailing list at rockfight.co. We think you'll like it.
You won't regret it. Also, tag us, and if you see funny stuff online that you think we should talk about or whatever, just give us a tag. We'll bring it up. We'll talk about it on the show.
Yeah, and then like Justin mentioned, coming up later this episode, we'll be sitting down with journalist Bryce Covert, who has covered the unionization efforts amongst employees at REI for Adventure Journal, and she's going to chat with us about the latest news coming out of those efforts from the past week, as well as give us some context about what this all means for this notable outdoor retailer. So make sure you stick around for that. But if you're listening to this, it's probably Monday, May 27th, and we recorded this on Friday, May 24th, which means in between, we had ourselves a weekend. That means it's time for America's favorite podcast segment, What is Justin Doing This Weekend? Presented by Long Weekend Coffee. So, Justin, what are you up to this weekend?
I mean, dude, it is a long weekend.
It is literally a long weekend.
It's literally a long weekend. I'm just mainlining long weekend coffee all weekend. Here's my theory. Okay. If I go into tomorrow morning and I inject my body with, that's a weird way of saying get an IV going.
There you go.
I'm just on a full long weekend coffee drip. Is it possible that there will be some kind of quantum thing where my weekend never ends?
You're saying just because something's called long weekend and it is a long weekend, you're gonna you're gonna.
Do you know anything about quantum mechanics, Colin?
I saw Avengers Endgame.
It's wild out there. It seems to be. I encourage everybody to go watch Dark Matter on Apple Plus. I'm really enjoying that right now. And talk about a mind f. So we don't like to swear on this.
We never swear on this show. Wait, so it's on your mind basically. The quantum mechanics is on your mind lately. Is that?
Well, when isn't it? When isn't it? Superposition.
You do have a Master of Arts,
that's amazing.
So
I do. Yes. Anyway, what we're kind of realizing at this point is if you kind of think about anything, you affect the outcome of whatever you're thinking about. I mean, that seems to be a weird basic rule of quantum physics these days. So if I'm just mainlining coffee that's called long weekend on a long weekend, it's possible that just that much long weekendness will affect my reality to the point where I am living in a long weekend, a perpetual weekend, which is really all we're trying for.
Would you want to be on a perpetual weekend?
Yes, Colin, I would.
Really? I don't know if you would.
Why?
Does time freeze in this? Like, your kids stop aging? Do you stop aging? Are you just now? This is it.
God, I hope so. They're so cute. I don't want them to get any older.
What if you don't get to pick the moment and it's at a moment where someone's throwing a tantrum and now you're stuck in that moment?
Oh my God, that's terrible. Terrible.
So maybe we shouldn't fuck with quantum mechanics.
Shit. Like right as the drip goes in, it's like all of a sudden like my 2-year-old falls and like
the dolly.
splits her face open.
Oh my God.
Oh. And you're like, it'd be like that locked in syndrome where you're conscious but you like physically incapacitated. You can't move.
You can't even. You're just stuck there listening to it.
And I was like, oh no.
You can't even drink the coffee because you're just locked in.
just trying to communicate. Turn it off.
Before we move off, do you want to? I was going to create like a sound little thing, like Tadpole Watch 2024.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah, let's check in.
What's going on with tadpoles? The tadpoles.
Well, I'm glad you asked. So there's 2 of them in there, and one of them has like full on frog legs now, which is pretty sick. And it will like use them to push off. And I spent a lot of time looking at them, and I keep thinking like, is it shocked that it has legs? Like, it's not like it knew that was going to happen. It's just like, holy fuck, I have legs. Like, that's such a weird thing to me. And it just kind of like chills on the bottom, sitting on the rest of it. Everything forward of that just looks like standard tadpole, but it has these like big frog feet on the back now. The other one is like way of a late bloomer. It's just got some little nubs. But they're not eating the bass. The bass are in there growing.
And they're eating the fish flakes.
They're loving the fish food. This is all working out great.
So what Justin is doing this weekend is presented by Long Weekend Coffee, where we are taking suggestions for the future editions of Justin's Weekend. If you want to send them over, myrockfight@gmail.com. When you send the proof that you reviewed the show and you're going to get your sticker, you can also send a suggestion for what Justin should do on the weekend. But if you want to start off your days, adventures, and all of your long weekends, because we're just wrapping up a long weekend if you're listening to this on Monday, head over to longweekend.coffee, load up on a batch of beans, and then at checkout, enter the promo code ROCK10 to get 10% off of your first order. Long Weekend Coffee, more weekend and coffee, please. All right, so hey, Justin, did you hear I started playing ice hockey again? Did you hear that?
No, I haven't. Yeah. I haven't heard that because I ignore all the text messages.
It was covered in Outdoor Podcasters Daily. I think it was a headline. Yeah.
Oh, was it? Okay.
So no, but we talk about you and I talked before about like what a cool sport it is from a gear perspective. So I thought we could do a little segment where we kind of discuss what is the coolest sport, like definitively your top 5 coolest sports. And I think the only real
you mean in terms of what how they look.
It's right,
like their uniform and the whole kit.
Right. It's basically when I say the name of a sport, like what's the image that pops into your head and your knee jerk reaction of like that's fucking cool or like it could use some work. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So did you come up with 5?
I did, but I want to. How do you want to do this? You want to bounce? You want to just go 1-to-1, or do you want to give all 5 and then I give my 5?
Should we go like 5 through 1, like we take turns?
Okay. Why? I couldn't rank them. You
gotta rank them.
Okay, fine. I'll rank them. Well, then here you give yours and I'll rank mine while you're giving yours. Okay.
I have my number 5. I have rugby.
I mean, it's a fucking collar shirt.
They
and
look
shorts.
awesome though. You ever watch like clips?
It's because they're huge dudes and women. They just look cool as hell anyway. Yeah, you're right. I guess that's the point.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm into it. I follow
the basis for that one was if I'm scrolling Instagram and for whatever reason I think that was showing up in the algorithm because like the female, the All Blacks equivalent of I guess I don't know if it's the female All Blacks, but the New Zealand female rugby team. For whatever reason, it's been showing up in my Instagram feed a ton. They're doing like their hakas and they're out there just like running over people and they look badass. And I love the simplicity of it. It's like, it's just shorts and and the shirt. And they're literally running over people trying to get to the goal line. I don't understand rugby, the rules, but I think they look awesome. So that was my number 5.
Yeah, I don't really understand it either. I don't understand it, but that's a good one.
What do you got?
Well, I thought you were gonna go through.
You may go through all of them.
Okay. Yeah, well, I can do my
Okay.
5. I know which one is going to be bottom, and we joked about this the other day, but I literally mean it. I have a well put together backpacker at number 5 on my list. There's something. It could just be because that's something I do a lot, and it makes me excited just to see somebody like getting ready. But like, you got like whether there's 2 options here. I don't know if that's cheating, but somebody who is just geared up and they're maybe a fast packer. They have like cool stuff on. They got like even though I don't wear them, like bright trail runners on. They just look like they mean business. I think it looks cool. I like being kitted out like that. I think I don't know why. I just think it's nice. When I briefly flirted with ultralight packing and stuff, I was always like, this looks cool. So I like that a lot. But I also, more than that, love it when you encounter like old prospector on the trail, from Saturday Night Live, some ancient person with like an external frame pack and like oil lamps dangling from it. Maybe they have an eye patch, like an ancient dog, and they're just badass.
Backpacking
like
pirate.
that to me is like the coolest thing in the world. Especially if you're that fast packer person, you have your $700 Hyperlight backpack and your $1,200 Hyperlight tent, and your whole kit weighs like what a Kleenex does. And here comes an 80-year-old person with 75 pounds on their pack. They don't even know where they are or where they're going, and they're going to be just fine. Nothing.
I've been out here since 1972
in the entire world. Yeah, totally. They've been lost for 30 years, and they're
like,
fine. They don't even
I actually
realize
don't want to hike anymore. Can you please tell me where the town is?
Is President Nixon still? So yeah, that's my.
I think
number 5.
backpacker's a weird one because I think you're right. It might be the most divisive one because there's a lot of iterations of the backpacker.
There's a lot of, I mean, you could also look like
There's
terrible,
a very dorky version of the backpacker.
There's also a very dorky version of a rugby player, I'm sure.
I don't know.
So.
That's just more based on your own physical attributes then because it's the same kit. I think like you can make some bad choices and be like a bad, because you're right. When you see like the people in the Sierra or in like Pennsylvania on the AT, like they're clearly well into their journey and they just look dialed. And that's when you start flirting with those, like, oh, I could do that.
Well, also, I guess some of the because I'm an extremely vain person. Some of the moments where I'm like, God, I looked good. We're like coming off a trail after 2 weeks, and I'm just like super tan and filthy and have about your level of like facial hair, and kind of like just slightly hardened from walking 20 miles a day. And I'm always like, I look pretty good. So yeah, that's probably part of it.
I got you. So my number 4, this is going to surprise some people, but I think, look, I got to be, objective here. Like I had freestyle skier because I think like as much as I'm not a ski person and resort skiing just more and more continues to piss me off. But just when you see like the person in just a dialed kit, kind of like, like whatever, like a fly low style kit with the skis, the helmet, the goggles, and they look clean, but also like they're going to go do some rad shit today. I'm like, it's a good look. I got to admit, it's a good look. Now, like, if we were doing a bottom 5 list, like number 1 for me would probably be like the downhill racer skier, like the Olympics, like who are in like the spandex onesie with the helmet on.
Yeah,
just not a good look.
Especially when they're like the German guy who has like a huge beer belly, but he's really fast.
Right. Yes. Yeah. It's incredible. Yeah. I'm not judging the sport. I mean, they're going literally like 100 miles an hour on skis. Like, no. All respect, but you don't look that great. Versus like the park skier on in like the perfect sort of like outdoorsy like Gore-Tex kit. That looks pretty good.
What about bobsledders? They look pretty badass because they're giant and they have that cool as hell helmet.
I'd rather be a bobsledder than a luger too.
Bobsled to me is like, honestly, to me, bobsled is by far, besides hockey, by far the coolest winter Olympic sport. Like nothing even can touch it to me. I will watch every bobsled run. 2-person, 4-person, love it all. All right, so that was your 4.
What's your number 4?
Number 4 for me is going to be, I think I'm going to go with a fly angler, fly fisher person.
All right.
I'm really uncomfortable with the term fly fisherman, but there's not a good gender neutral one these days. I think fisherman actually is kind of becoming that. But with bitchin' waders and like a really cool sun shirt over a cap. And like you got like, if you have like a cool pack, I think I love that kit too. I love putting on my fly fishing stuff. I absolutely love putting on my waders. I think it's like the coolest thing I do, which is fun. I used to feel that way about like wetsuits when I would surf. I felt like a superhero. Sometimes putting on a wetsuit and like a hood and like booties and all that sort of stuff. But no, there's something about fly fishing. It just looks, I don't know what it is. It looks so cool to me. I really like it. It can also look very uncool, but like if you have the right kit, it's pretty neat. There's there's like some kind of cool like means business.
Yeah.
I don't know. If you go back and watch the patio sucks at the one where he's fly fishing, like the guy he's fly fishing with is like looks great. Like I think I really like getting kitted up for fly fishing. So that's my number 4.
You're not gonna like my number 3, but it's rock climber.
What kind?
Well, good point. It's gonna. So this is where I talk myself in and out of it because like when I picture a rock climber, that knee jerk thing, it is more the boulderer just wearing either shorts or like
Capri pants
or pants.
Capri pants.
Potentially capri. No, usually pants that have been rolled up.
That counts as capri pants.
With the chalk bag. But then the problem with like both alpinists, like mountaineering and rock climbing, they have the dorkiest helmets of all the helmet sports. Terrible helmets.
Oh,
you look terrible.
They do look kind of dorky. They're just round.
Yeah, and they sit really high
round.
up on top, which I get it, right? Because it's a thing, rocks coming down on top of the head. That's what you want.
It's kind of the same thing I was saying about like kayakers.
But I think the kayak helmet actually,
they have a silly helmet.
Those kind of baseball style kayak helmets, I think those can look really cool.
No.
Well, they're not on my list, so I'm not saying they're that cool. But I'm just saying, like, I would prefer to wear one of those than a rock helmet.
Well, all right. So that's your number 3. So I guess I'll put him at number 3 too. I actually have rock climbers on the list, but I have very specific rock climbers, which are 70s rock climbers who are climbing in jorts with no helmets.
So you have Jim Bridwell on your list.
Exactly. Like that's pretty badass. Yeah. Like wearing like Pumas, it seems like. Maybe not even
just
climbing
ripping
shoes.
darts, you know? He's got one behind his ear, like
just like so freaking strong. I love that. There's nothing cooler to me than on the footage of the men and women climbing in Yosemite in the 70s. Like that's as cool as outdoor people have ever looked.
I think
and ever will.
For other people who get tired of me, maybe lamenting the state of outdoor media or like the decline and like what happened to Outside or whatever. I forget if it was Outside or it was Backpacker or what magazine it was in, but there was an outdoor magazine probably in the early 90s profiling Jim Bridwell, and he's just talking about how like, nah man, smoking makes your lungs stronger for high alpine stuff and everything. Like there's no one been cooler in the world than Jim Bridwell. Yeah. He was great.
I mean, Valley Uprising is one of my favorite documentaries of all time. And it's rare. I would say I don't even climb. Valley Uprising and Endless Summer are the 2 movies where if I could like snap my fingers and transport myself into that world, I would do it and I would leave everything behind because it just looks that cool. So yeah, but that's number 3. I have 2 others above it, but that's number 3.
Well,
for me.
Just what you described is how I feel about my number 2, which is like river guide, / like river rat. Like, because when you see people like on the boat, I'm not usually like a plaid shirt and the outdoors guy, but like it works there. It's got bedrocks or chacos with like Patagonia baggies.
And like the plaid shirts unbuttoned, like way too far, maybe a little too far down.
Can of shit, like scraggly hair, dirty, but also just looking great and all there's
just feeling wonderful.
Has there ever been a bad picture taken of a river guide? I doubt it.
I hadn't thought about that, but that's a good one. That's a really good one.
When I see someone that says, I want to go throw it all away and go live outside and just do outdoor stuff for the rest of my life, it's usually that.
So my number 2 is very similar to my number 3, except they still exist. And this is the are you familiar with the really good Instagram account Bikepacking Sucks?
No, I'm gonna be though.
He's this Australian guy. He's Australian and it's terrific. And he rides in I don't think they're bedrocks, but he wears like nothing but like cool sandals and like short shorts, and he's a phenomenal rider. Like he'll take these like weird 70s steel bikes on bike parks and like jump them and stuff. He's also just weird, like makes really weird content. But I don't have a better word for it other than like the kind of hipster retro cycling thing. And I'm not talking about like a waxed mustache, like early 2000s fixie riders. I'm talking about jorts wearing, sandal wearing, really, really capable, burly, badass like bike packer people. Yeah, that's like Alexandra Huchin. Is that her last? Is that you know who I'm talking about? She rides like a single speed and wins all these like giant mountain bike events.
I do know what you're talking about.
But she like rides in boots and like jorts. So badass. Like that's extremely cool. That's it. That's your number 2. That's almost my number 1, but I have a romantic, nostalgic number 1.
I just went ice hockey. Sorry, I'm in the mood right now. I'm in the spot. I'm starting to play it again. The gear freaking rules.
It's a really boring Final Four.
It's not really great. I've sort of checked out after the Bruins got bounced, which they weren't even really in that series anyway, and I still like So I might see the final.
I watched a little bit of the Rangers Panthers game, and it was just like I just don't.
I'm kind of pulling for McDavid. I'd like to see the Oilers. I
bet even though they knock the Kings out every year, I'll always like the Oilers because I loved
Gretzky.
When they basically transported Gretzky and Curry to the Kings.
Yeah.
The Oilers became my second favorite team. Well, mine is also a mainstream sport, and it's baseball, but a particular baseball, which is the baseball players who still wear short pants and stirrups.
Stirrups, or does it have to be stirrups, or can it be like just the
Nope, it needs to be stirrups.
It has to be the stirrups.
Specifically needs to be stirrups. I don't understand why that went out of fashion. It truly baffles me. Nothing is cooler in the world than, and especially there's multiple kinds of stirrups, but the kinds that have like solid color up the top and then they narrow. Not the ones that's just a straight line all the way down the whole way, but the ones at the calf have like a round. Your whole calf is there, and then it gets narrow.
What function does the stirrup serve?
So it used to be, if I remember correctly, it actually used to be like a really, really, really long time ago. Players would put those on because you would get like spiked a lot and you would bleed. And so, like if you were playing second base, like a guy would slide and spike you and your ankles would bleed. So it had something to do with trying to keep the blood off of stuff, if I remember correctly.
That's kind of cool.
I think they all would be like red at first because it was like, oh, I'm going to get all bloody anyway. Yeah. And then it just kind of stuck. But, I mean, very few people wear them anymore. Little leaguers don't even. Yeah. I don't really understand. I don't know why that. I mean, maybe that's. When I played, everybody wore stirrups. Right. So, like, I don't. It's probably more comfortable without them, I'll admit, but nothing looks cooler. Nothing.
I said this to you before. I do take issue with the fact that they're just wearing like leather belts, and I'm like, how do you be athletic when you're wearing something that you bought at the mall? You know, as an integral part of your kit. Why do they still wear like a belt buckle like I wear with a pair of jeans? You know,
because it looks rad.
Does it? Does it look rad? I think it looks out of place.
Dude, have you ever played? It looks so badass. I love a baseball uniform. I love how hockey used to be like this. They didn't wear helmets. Yeah. But one of the things I love so much about a baseball uniform is I guess you could say the same thing about rugby. Like there's nothing else. It's just clothes. And like, it's always cool to see like, wow, that person's kind of small. And like, they're just in like regular clothes. And then they're just like the best shortstop you've ever seen in your life. Like there's something really neat about that. So and it's summer. I'm going to my first game tomorrow. I just freaking love baseball so much. And like a cool glove, cool hat, cool colors, and stirrups.
All right, let's get into some headlines.
All right.
So we're just going to start off today with a quick update to the conversation we had last week here on The Rock Fight with Paddling Magazine's Joe Podacek regarding the death of Tomas Robeson in the Grand Canyon. Not long before we released that episode of this show, a pre-scheduled video appeared on Tomas's YouTube channel, and the title of that video, it was Self-Obituary. I don't need to get into the details. I mean, I think the title sort of says it all. It definitely appears that, Tomas did not intend to return from his trip down the canyon. We've talked a lot about this story, and I'm not trying to belabor it, but and anyone who missed last week's episode, I would encourage you to go back and listen to our conversation with Joe. I think it was a really good one. But I do think now this is going to become one of those tales that is referenced or written about in our community for some time. Don't you think it's sort of like reaching that level?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because that has to happen all the time. I mean, that was both of our first thoughts, right? Like this was it. He went out, didn't that he did not
intend to come back was our first. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I gotta think that happens a lot. I mean, we talked about, I forget his name now, but the guy that just sat down on the mountain.
Guy Waterman.
Guy Waterman. God, that's a good name.
That's a good name.
Yeah, I guess, I mentioned this to Joe, like there is something romantic to me about that, I know Edward Abbey didn't die in the wilderness, but I feel like it's such an inspiring, awesome thing that he had his friends bury him in his favorite place in the desert, like illegally, and like nobody knows where it is except for maybe one person now at this point. And this isn't like Ed Abbey wrote, it's probably in Desert Solitaire, but he has this one of his short stories where he must have been working as a ranger. Mm-hmm. I don't think he stumbled on the guy. I think he was looking for the guy, but he finds a dead guy. And he's sitting he's leaning up against a Joshua tree, or he's probably not in Joshua tree. I don't know where he is. He's got to be in Utah. So he's in Arches, now that I think about it. So he's sitting under some kind of tree or a cactus, or I don't remember. He's leaning up against it for whatever meager shade there is. The body is, anyway, when Abby stumbles across it. And I think the guy had like a little bit of water with him or something. And Abby at first is like, oh, that must have been a horrific way to go. But then he starts kind of waxing poetic about, at least look at what his last view was. Like, this is pretty cool. And I think he's trying to provide some dignity to a very, horrifying place for this person to be in. But there's like, that always struck me as really romantic too. And so I think there is something, I mean, it sucks that some other people have to deal with it. Like someone has to go recover the body at some point. And I don't know. I wouldn't watch the video. I didn't want to watch the video. I didn't want to get sad or feel weird about it. So, I don't know much about whether the guy had a family or people who didn't want that to happen. But if it's kind of your own terms, I think it's kind of, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's kind of neat. At least the part of me does. I don't know. I guess I would like to have the opportunity, if my life ever ended up in a point where it was like, I've got nothing else going on, where I can just kind of walk out into the forest and like, that's it. Because I'd rather do that than a lot of other things.
Well, anyway, I don't know. I do think, though, this will be when we're kind of talking. I imagine there's going to be a book about this. There'll be a little, videos about this. People are going to, this will get, we'll hear about Tomas Robinson again. I really think
probably.
we will. So.
Yeah.
All right, next story is another follow-up from a story we covered here on The Rock Fight. Following the very public demise of the brand at last month's Sea Otter Classic, it was announced this week that Kona is back, baby!
I'm like weirdly and really excited about it.
I want to get into it because I don't really know why I am, but the story goes that original founders and owners Jake Heilbrunn, I guess, and Dan Gerhard released a statement this week with the news that they have purchased back the brand they started in 1988, but then sold to Kent Outdoors in 2021. Yeah, no, you covered the story for AJ. So, happy ending for a brand that people seem to love, I guess. I don't know. I'm pumped about it too.
I don't even think you need to care about bikes or Kona to be happy about something like this. I mean, the bummer part is theoretically they use whatever money they made from Kent. I mean, they probably made money on the deal. I don't know what they sold it to Kent for, but presumably the value is pretty low.
Yeah.
So it's probably an opportunity they could have passed by. But I mean, what would be the bummer would be if like nothing changes and it's just the same. But that's not going to be the case. I guarantee they'll strip their inventory way back, and kind of concentrate on a few classics or whatever. But they're not going to do direct to consumer for a while, and they really want to if at all, they're saying. And so they really want to strengthen their relationship with independent shops, which is fantastic. I mean, who doesn't love hearing that? Well, I guess people who hate going into stores and communicating.
No, it's a good way to go.
It's awesome, and like more bike brands should do it, and it's great that they cared enough that they didn't want to just let it wither and die, or get bought by some other Kona was probably very close to being bought by some other like non-bike entity and just pumping out like Walmart bikes, like that could have easily happened.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm stoked. I mean, I love my Unit X. If they built the entire brand around that bike, it wouldn't be a bad idea. So, I'm stoked for these guys. I think it's great.
It kind of makes me want to look at them for my next bike for sure. Like now I'm like even 100%. Way more interested in it, which I never really would have thought of before. I mean, I wouldn't have thought of it even 5 or 6 years ago. I mean, maybe I would have, but it wouldn't have been. Now I'm like, I might seek them out when I go looking for another bike.
Exactly, 100%. Like the guys seem cool as hell. Like their story is great, and they started working together like a really long time ago, and just kind of gradually built up their relationship and decided to start a bike brand. But it's a good story, and it's something you want to support, and I'm all about it.
I guess we'll keep the theme going with things we've talked about a lot this summer because there was a shit ton of news coming out of Everest over the last week. All of this is from Explorer's Web. I mean, obviously it's the time. We're in the weather window where like people are trying to summit. But the other day there was a cornice accident where literally a cornice broke off, and it's one of those days when there's like 500 people standing in a line on like a knife edge.
Call.
Yeah. 6 climbers have died, including 6.
Is that more than normal at this point, do you think?
I think it's trending that way. I feel like it was wasn't 12 the 96 disaster, right? And they've beaten that.
Well, yeah, but that was like all at once, wasn't it?
Right, but my point is like 6 sounds like a lot. And there's 7. Yeah. There was another camper who died at Camp 3. Another climber who died at Camp 3. But
that counts.
Well, he was
going up Lhotse.
He was going up Lhotse. There's 2 more that are missing. But then we also had a Sherpa who set our summit record. He's summited like 31 times. There's a woman going for an FKT achieved an FKT for the female speed record. Yeah.
I didn't even see that.
And then there was another team that summited from the north side. And in that article, it was all like there's no one up there. They got the summit to themselves. They didn't see anyone out there. And I know the north side is the more technical side. But like if you and I were seriously debating, should we go climb Everest? I would only consider the north side because I don't want to go stand in line with all of these people. So crazy times over at Mount Everest.
Yeah, I don't know when I feel like it was either last Friday, or maybe it was a couple days ago where they were saying like the coming weekend is going to be hell basically up there. I think it might have been this weekend coming up maybe because it's just going to be a huge crush to try to get to the top.
When you and I spoke about, was it Amy Gubser who did the big swim out to the Farallon Islands? And I was kind of making the point of like, you see that in the paper and you think like, oh, well, she swam a long way to an island. You don't really understand how difficult that was until you really kind of learned about it. And I think Everest is rapidly reaching that point, right? Where it's like, oh, you climb Mount Everest. Good for you. You climb Mount, but that's been done. But then you see some of these images and how gnarly the terrain is on Mount Everest. Like it is, like I understand, K2's harder. That doesn't mean that it makes Everest easy. Like it's like these images of like these very thin edges and ledges and cliff faces these people are clinging to, and there's 500 of them. It would be impressive if it was one person. The fact they're all just standing around there, it's.
I'm trying to decide if it's harder to swim to the Farallon. I mean, physically, it's probably harder to swim to the Farallons. I mean, like you have to train for that for a really long time. And apparently Everest, as long as you're like reasonably fit,
they can drag you to the top,
and you're willing to suffer. Like you might die, but you can make it. Like there's no chance I could swim to the Farallons.
This is actually a great question.
But she's with yeah, it's also a death zone. I mean, she's in water that it's amazing these people don't get hypothermia. I mean, she's not wearing a wetsuit. And obviously you stop swimming and you will drown. You know, like you can't stop. But they have support boats. It's not like you're out there on your own. I do think there has been a guy who did that, who swam from the Farallons to San Francisco.
To Mount Everest.
Exactly. His name was Goran Krop. Like he swam toward San Francisco, drifted north, and ended up coming ashore in Bolinas. But I don't think he had any support. I think he was just
doing it. He's just out there.
Yeah. So I'm not sure that like everybody that's made the swim has had support boats. But I mean, it's like physically, it's got to be way more demanding to swim out to the Farallons.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Because if you said put a gun to my head, you have to do one of these two things. I'd probably choose climbing Everest because I climbed mountains before, and I feel like
I would choose the swim as long as I have a support
boat. But that's it. Because even the swim, which would be harder, I think physically, you're still more likely to die on Everest because there's more ways you can.
As long as the boat is like going to be able to pick me up,
right?
If I run into trouble, yeah, I'm going to choose the Farallons.
Yeah, I think I would too. Neither one sounds great.
No, I don't want to do either one at all. I would literally empty my entire savings account to not have to do either one.
Oh, you have a savings account. Nice work.
Well, you know.
That's a really interesting comp, though. Like, which one would you do?
It is. Yeah.
We should maybe that should be the next segment we do is like find two horrible things that neither of us would ever do, and then debate which one we would choose doing. Actually,
we just did that.
Well, I know. Let's pick some other things.
Yeah, we'll do that again.
Okay,
yeah, that could be a recurring one.
Yeah, we don't want to keep talking about Mount Everest, but it's like Jesus, man. It's just like dominating.
Well, you know what? We probably won't starting next week.
That's a good point. Everyone's gonna be done. We'll find.
They just pack it up and they roll it away. They put it into storage. That's right. They deflate the whole mountain.
Yep, it just goes. That'd be incredible. Well, all right. Good season, everybody.
Wrap it up.
All right. Well, we're joined now by journalist Bryce Covert. Is it Covert? Did I say that correctly?
Yes, Covert, like Covert Ops.
Is that your real last name?
Oh, that's so cool.
It is my real last name.
Very cool.
Like you get to say like Covert Ops. That's badass. All right, so who recently wrote a story for Adventure Journal covering the unionization efforts of REI employees at 9 of their 181 locations, specifically covering some of the efforts of employees at REI's Soho location in New York City. Earlier this week, Sporting Goods Business reported that on May 18th, unionized employees at the REI in Chicago walked off the job to protest a lack of engagement from REI management with their efforts there and forcing the store to close in the process for the day. And then just yesterday, just saw this while I was writing our outline for this conversation, on May 23rd, union members at the store you covered for AJ in Soho staged a protest rally in front of their store, claiming that REI has not been bargaining in good faith. So, first of all, welcome to the show, Bryce. Really, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So to start, have you been keeping tabs on the REI situation since covering it for AJ? Is there anything you can add to what went down in Chicago and yesterday in New York?
Yeah, so one other action that they held in recent weeks was on May 20th, some local elected officials in Cleveland, Ohio, went to the Beechwood store, the REI store, and hand-delivered both a letter to management demanding that the company bargain in good faith and reach a contract this year, and also took an unusual step of hand-delivering some unfair labor practice charges to the company, which is notable, I think, because one of the things that keeps coming up with REI workers and other retail workers when they're unionizing is how are they going to force these companies to come to the table to agree to some terms? They're probably not going to be able to do it on their own. So having some firepower behind you of like local elected officials, politicians, the public, you need someone on your side. So it's interesting to see that happen in Cleveland recently. And I think workers are really trying to take advantage of the annual sale that I believe is going on right now at REI.
Right, the anniversary sale, yeah.
And then also the shareholder meeting, I believe, recently happened, and they sort of staged some stuff around that as well. So they're trying to take advantage of any, I think, public-facing moments to put their cause out there and get customers to pay attention.
Have you seen that anywhere else? I mean, Cleveland feels like I assume that you're interested in labor practices, generally speaking, right? This wasn't just an REI thing. So I'm
Right.
guessing that you have some expertise in this, but I feel like Cleveland is a labor town, or at least was. Like that doesn't surprise me that there might be a like a union sort of element running through the kind of philosophy of some local leaders. But are you seeing that anywhere else where local leaders are standing with the REI employees?
I don't think I've seen it yet. I think they may correct me because I may not have seen everything,
Sure.
but it's still kind of early days for them. This is the first that I saw something like that where it really grabbed my attention that elected officials were part of it. And again, I think that actually is a very powerful tool to put some political pressure on a company. They'll probably be eager to move up the food chain and go to maybe senators or, some more statewide or federal positions than just local officials. But anytime you can put that kind of spotlight on them, put that kind of pressure on them, helps them try to get the company to the table.
Well, so if you, anybody listening, I'm pretty sure we still have copies of Adventure Journal 32. That's the current issue. We're printing 33, or 33 is being printed and sent out pretty soon. But you should still be able to get it on our website. But which is the article that Bryce wrote for us. It's a fantastic piece, and that's kind of what spurred this interview. But Bryce, for people who haven't read it, can you just kind of walk through really quickly, what's going on with REI, what's going on with the unionization efforts, and what you've seen from the company in response? Just really brief,
Sure.
Kind of a 30,000 foot view.
Sure. So essentially coming out of the pandemic, I think REI employees were, like many retail employees, asked to essentially put their lives on the line to keep these companies going. REI in particular was deluged with interest from people who were desperate to get outside. Some of their stores even opened before other kinds of stores when things were starting to reopen. So these workers were in there when we didn't have vaccines, when we didn't know much about the virus. It was pretty scary. They feel like they really gave a lot to the company. They are part of this wave, I think, of retail employees saying, okay, we gave you a lot, so what do we get now that the crisis has passed? And I think that's where a lot of these union campaigns came from. And it's certainly the case at REI. So they had safety concerns specifically around COVID, but as they start talking to each other, they start realizing there are other issues like pay, like training, that they want addressed, and they decide that a union is the way to go. The REI Soho store is the first to vote. Like you said, there's now been 9 that have voted in favor of unionization. There's one store that's still kind of being litigated and hasn't had a decision yet. And the company has, from what I've heard from workers at many different stores, taken a very typical, aggressive anti-union stance. I think the workers possibly thought that it would take a different tactic with them, given the way REI presents itself and talks about its values all the time. That is not the case. They hired Morgan Lewis, which is the law firm advising Amazon in its anti-union crusade. They sent managers in from headquarters and other places to stores that were thinking about unionizing to try to hold these meetings and say you shouldn't do it. They've just really used every tool in the toolbox that employers tend to rely on. And employees, again, were taken a little bit aback, but I think have now regrouped and are trying to work on a strategy to push back on that.
So putting myself in the shoes of the employees, I worked outdoor retail, worked for some big chains, and I worked for brands as well. And not saying anything's fair or unfair, just sort of what do you think? And on the surface, there's better wages and these sort of things, but I mean, ultimately they have a choice in themselves, right? They can go, you can find a job somewhere else, you can go work to another retailer. There are options for them there. What is really the larger? Is it to kind of bring attention to these things happen at a larger point to kind of use the bad PR for a brand like REI and say, hey, these people kind of hold themselves up and they're not really doing as good a job as they say that they're doing? Is it more of a statement, or is there an outcome that they say, oh my God, we got these things and boy, what a wonderful place this is to work now?
I think a lot of things are happening at REI. Again, there's this wave of retail unionization going on right now. And one of the challenges there is, like you said, people often just go get a different job when things are getting crappy at the one they're at,
right.
Which in retail they often are. Retail is not a well-paid, high benefits line of work. So people cycle through, and that makes unionizing and organizing really tough. You'll convince some coworkers that they should stick with you and band together, and then a bunch of them will either decide to leave or maybe they'll get laid off. I mean, there's just a lot of cycling through, and that makes it really hard. But I think what these employees at REI and other places like Starbucks, at Apple, at Trader Joe's are trying to say is, first of all, maybe this job could be one that has more longevity if we invested in it. It's somewhere, I want to be able to stay here maybe and actually build a career. Particularly, I think at REI, these aren't typically people, just anyone off the street. You're supposed to, in theory, at least, have some expertise, be able to talk to customers. I mean, I'm an REI customer, and I love that I go in and feel like someone can tell me which rock climbing shoes are the best ones to get. So there's more attachment, I think, to this job potentially. But they're also saying no matter where you work and how transitory it is, and even if you're only there for a couple of months, you still deserve a baseline of good treatment, of decent pay and good treatment. And this is how we're trying to secure it. So, I think there are people involved in the REI campaign who said to me, I would love to stay here. I want to stay here. And this is part of how I want to bring about that change. They also are, I think, trying to hold REI both to its own values. I mean, it has all these values it has really laid out in detail to the public and to the employees. And they're also trying to say, we want it to be what it was. A lot of the workers talk to me about a big shift that they've felt a little bit before, during, and now after the pandemic, that people became more disposable. They didn't get the kind of training they used to get to become those experts. Schedules weren't as reliable. They're saying, I want to hold on to what made this a good place to work and really enshrine it in a union contract.
Is there something that correlates with that change? I mean, I feel like they've had a new CEO in recent years.
Yeah.
But
I think it probably lines up pretty well. I mean, on the shop floor, I'm not sure they were really able to point to exactly where this change was coming from, but my guess is that it comes from the top like that. Yeah.
Well, from the REI perspective, I mean, and I'm curious if you've talked to anybody internally at REI, but it is sometimes, if you boil it to the most basic things, I mean, it's just math, right? I mean, in last year, they took a $300 million loss. Like, the company's not doing particularly well in their last, 12 to 18 months. So when it comes to meeting worker demands, and some of that is financially driven, some of that is more just, working environment, understood. But, at some point, this just feels like a PR disaster on their side that they could probably largely avoid by just saying a few really positive things, or at least even kick the can down the road. So have you had a chance to talk to anybody at REI, or what's your view of what's coming out of Kent, Washington right now?
They did not let me get on the phone with anybody. They did answer the questions I had in pretty good detail. I mean, essentially, the spokesperson I was in touch with kept saying over and over, we are not against unions. We are not anti-union. However, we don't think a union should exist in our stores, which is, make of that what you will, I suppose. Right. I put those things back to back in the story because it doesn't make a lot of sense to me to say we love unions, but we don't think one should exist here. I mean, for me, those are two conflicting statements. But that's sort of the line that they kept taking. Again, they have taken a very aggressive but very typical anti-union approach to this. They are throwing resources at trying to stymie these campaigns. They're dragging their feet on contract negotiations. This is what corporate America tends to do. Right. And from what I've heard from experts, it's actually a particularly American thing that they dig in against unions, that they take it as sort of a almost personal affront. And it often even breaches from, a financial decision to an emotional one where they may be losing money on fighting a campaign. Like Starbucks, for example, shut down all of its locations in Ithaca because they were unionizing. Now they don't make any money in Ithaca. That doesn't seem like a great financial decision, but that is the kind of decision-making that comes because I think a lot of it is about power and not so much about finances. You have to share power with workers when there's a union contract involved. You can't do things as unilaterally as you used to be able to. But that said, what baffles me a little bit about REI's stance and others is you don't have to agree to anything in a union contract. You can sit down at the table and just say, no. I mean, you do have to bargain in good faith, but that's a pretty loose rule. Like you said, if they're not doing financially very well, they can say that and say, we just can't afford higher wages. I mean, and then it's up to the workers to see if they can push back on that. So what I don't understand is, particularly with a company like REI that has made so much of its selling point to its customer base, these are our values. We let workers go outside the day after Thanksgiving every day. We're a shareholder-led, or not shareholder-led. What do they call the co-op members? We're co-op member-led. We're not beholden to financial shareholders. Like all these things. Why not just say yes to the union and then see how bargaining goes? I really do think it's a mix of feeling sort of personally affronted that workers would want to share power with you. And also just all the people who advise corporate America say the same things over and over again. Get rid of the union at any cost. You don't want one in there.
I was going to say, it sounds like, I don't know a ton about this, but it sounds like they're probably just being tight-lipped and acting on behalf, or just doing whatever their attorneys say. Because it's like you open any door, and I don't know. I agree. It's baffling. It's really baffling. I'm wondering if they've had any issues with hiring because of this. Like, I don't know if this is the kind of thing that would preclude someone from going and trying to get a job at REI. But do you know anything about that?
I don't, and it's tough to say too because they have been laying people off, and it's hard to say, what keeps people away. Is it that? Is it the other thing? One of the tough things for workers, and this is again not just true at REI, is that one of the tactics that American employers have is dragging their feet on contract negotiation. And the longer that goes on, the harder it is for the union to say, isn't this worth it? Aren't you so glad you stuck your neck out and did this with us and put all this effort into it? If you can't then say, here's what we achieved on the other end. I mean, REI workers, it's been, I believe, 2 years, maybe more, since they unionized it at the Soho location. And they have nothing written in stone to prove for it. They have no improvements on paper. That's really tough to keep people engaged and excited and show momentum to other stores to get involved. And I think that's quite deliberate. I mean, there is essentially no rule forcing them to do it any faster. And then you sort of hope that you can just sort of sap momentum and let turnover take its toll, and maybe everything sort of fizzles out.
It's just a boner of a move. I just don't get. I mean, even when they started hearing that they might be unions, I feel like REI, given the history and to your point, the reason people work at this brand is because they want to work there. They could go work at the Gap or wherever if they want to. They choose to work at REI, and it's just there's so much they could have done to avoid being put in the position that they're in. And can you think of another example of a consumer brand that's sort of known a little bit for its altruistic reputation, faced any kind of labor challenges or scrutiny in this way? Is this a one of one?
Oh no, this is very common. This is very common. In the story I mentioned briefly, Columbia Sportswear, which did this whole thing about its CEO taking a pay cut at the start of the pandemic.
And Outside as well.
Outside magazine. Yep. Neither one ended up actually unionizing, I think probably because they were met with a really aggressive anti-union campaign. But even, Starbucks, I think, kind of built this reputation of, we give our workers college benefits and we treat you well and you get to wear fun colors in your hair. And, I think it really did try to build a progressive reputation. And then it has been scorched earth from that company. I think it's recently they've actually started sitting down with the workers, but for the first year or two of the campaign, just scorched earth anti-union tactics. And I actually think that damaged the brand and the company because it was so
you
public.
Never think about them the same. I mean, you just don't. I'll still go there, but I don't think about them the same. I mean, same thing with REI. Colin and I talk all the time about how if the shit hits the fan, we'll go get retail jobs, and REI would kind of be the first place I would go. But I don't know that I don't know anymore. I don't know. It's tough to say. It's really hard to come back from that.
I mean, you get in the hierarchy of if you have a specialty, like a really good specialty outdoor retailer in your town, you usually default to that first over at REI. But now, but it also be I need some camp fuel. I know they'll have it at REI. I'll just go there, kind of thing. Now it's no, I'm going to go out of my way to not go to REI. Our community is very passionate and earnest about these things. The longer this goes on and the more the reputation goes south, it will have an impact. And I know they're trying to open more stores, but.
Well, and if workers are smart, what they really need to be thinking hard about is how do they harness that customer loyalty? Because I do think it's a particular kind of loyalty among REI customers, not just because, it might be a more progressive crowd, but also because it is a very specialized loyalty. You can get coffee anywhere. You might like Starbucks best, but there's a lot of places to get coffee. Like you're saying, I mean, REI has a particular thing to sell, and at least, again, as an REI customer, it felt like you could walk in and you knew that someone would be able to tell you what it was that you were looking for if you had no idea, which was me most of the time. They have a lot to risk here. So the workers need to figure out how to use that, I think, as a pressure point against the company. And I know that they are thinking hard about that and trying to figure that out. I will point out that, boycotts should only come when workers ask for them. I think these workers have not called for that. And it isn't a tactic that they can use sometimes. But up until that point, if you want to be in solidarity with these workers, don't change your business habits, follow their lead. And if you want to support them, I know they have petitions. And again, they may have some other demands coming. I think it would be smart if they did, but they haven't really quite gotten public about those or had those coalesce yet.
That's a good point. I mean, we're on workers' side generally speaking, but we also are on record of saying we really like REI. So it's tough. It's tough. It's tough for us, to a certain degree, and not everybody has the time to really dig into these issues. I'm just so curious. Hearing you talk about it, I was going to ask about if you had the chance to talk to any other corporations that are actively engaging in anti-union efforts, if it was a personal thing. Because the more I'm hearing you talk about it, the more I'm realizing it's got to just be these boardrooms that are just, you hear union and you just don't want to soften. You don't want to seem like a communist or whatever it is that these people are so afraid of. It just seems like it has to be personal at this point.
Well, unfortunately, I don't know that anyone has actually talked to me. I would absolutely love to actually talk to these executives and have an honest conversation. I think that's never going to happen.
I think all of America would, generally speaking, for every executive in any position, we would all like to just sit them down for a little while and just talk about what the hell is going on.
What are you up to? What are you thinking?
Yeah.
But one thing, and this I actually think is not REI's situation, but one thing that's been pointed out to me is it particularly seems to be personal when the founder of the company is involved. So a Howard Schultz or a Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, totally. Yep. Mm-hmm.
They take it very personally when workers unionize. And that's, I think, when it frequently goes into where they start putting the company in the red just to fight the union, because it's not about money. It's about how dare you.
They're betrayed.
How dare you, first of all, how dare you say that I'm not the best employer ever, but also how dare you say you deserve to share power with me. This is my company. This is my baby. And actually, it was after Howard Schultz got out of the way, essentially, that the company announced that it would sit down with the workers and actually bargain. I don't know how those sessions are going, so who knows what's happening at the table, but that was a big breakthrough and it happened without him. So I think it's just clear that there are some people in corporate America who feel very emotional about this.
The problem I have with that is we could sit down with those people, and I would imagine actually we would learn a lot as well. And frankly, some of their perspective might win over some of how we feel.
Yeah, maybe.
But it's the just tone deaf response. I mean, to your exact point, these retail places, these places where consumer engagement is important, and you can have your reputation be damaged. I mean, REI is the best example of it. Like everything we talk about, right? It's the community, it's the outdoors, it's the earnest response. People love that, they love going. And you didn't think once well, okay, this is going to suck. We really don't want to have them form a union. So what do we do so that doesn't happen, but that we still come off well? Yeah. It's crazy to me.
You could have made a very cynical move there that still didn't make them look bad. Yeah.
Right.
The other thing I think that's happened, and it's been really fast, so I think corporate America maybe hasn't caught up, is that there's been a huge sea change in this country about how people see unions and also how the power that unions have. Two things happen. One is that public sentiment among Americans has just totally shifted toward unions in a way that it was not. I mean, 10 years ago. That's been a really big shift. And that makes a huge difference. I mean, it used to be you could get away with cracking down on union campaign, and who cares? The public doesn't care. Customers don't care.
I grew up in Reagan's in the 80s, right? It's like, oh, union's bad.
Exactly.
We don't like unions around here. Yeah.
The other thing that's particular to this moment right now is that we have a National Labor Relations Board, which is like the federal agency that essentially arbitrates workers' power in the workplace and their rights in the workplace, is very pro-worker and willing to essentially help these campaigns along as much as within their power. And that has not been true basically up until the Biden administration. So it's a particular moment where workers really have the wind at their backs legally as well. I mean, U.S. labor law is incredibly weak, even with an aggressive NLRB, but if you were going to unionize, this is a great moment to do it. So I think workers are also taking advantage of that particular
moment.
Yeah.
That's probably a good place to end, don't you think? She has.
Well, yeah, I just was going to say,
left.
I know you got to wrap up. I mean, is there, just to kind of put a bow on it, I mean, what's your take on how this resolves? I mean, do you think, does REI come to the table? Do you have a gut on how this plays out?
I do. REI eventually has to come to the table. I think it's a question of how long does it take them and under what circumstances do they come and what damage is inflicted to either side in the interim, for workers to get REI to the table and also to make strong demands that are met at the table. As I said before, that requires figuring out how to leverage power. Who can you get on your side? What actions can you take? And I know workers are thinking about this, but it's a really tough undertaking. Unionizing in some ways, like the vote itself, is almost the easy step. And it's a really hard step, but it's kind of the easy part. Getting a contract is so much harder. So I do think there will be one eventually. It's just I don't know when that's going to happen and how much they'll be able to get from it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on, spending some time with us. This is just fascinating to kind of dig into.
You can tell I got a whole soapbox about unions and workers' rights.
Well,
we'll keep it.
Where can people read your stuff?
You can check me out at brycecovert.com. I'm still on Twitter, so you can check me out there. And I'm also on Blue Sky, which I wish more people were on. So,
well, you can also, if you're intrigued by the story, go to adventure-journal.com and check out AJ issue 32. It's easily worth the price of the whole issue just for the story. It's a great piece.
Wonderful piece.
Really,
thank you
thanks
so much
for doing that for us, Bryce.
Yeah, and if Bryce, if anything comes up, we'll keep an eye on SGB. If anything pops up, maybe we'll have you back on to see what else is going on with REI.
That sounds great.
Thanks, Bryce.
Thanks.
All right, man. Well, we can wrap it up there. The Rock Fight is a production of Rock Fight LLC. Thank you to Bryce Covert for coming on and chatting with us. And for Justin Hausman, I'm Colin True. Thanks for listening. Here to take us out, it's Krista Makes. It's going to sing the Rock Fight fight song right now. And we'll see you next time, Rock Fighters. Rock Fight!